Hello everybody, it's been a little over a month since Pass Horses and the Loyal Players Pass were replaced with Yggdrasil and the Daily Objective system. I was a player who heavily relied on my Pass Horse farm for not just passes, but for other resources like droppings for my plant divines, resources and aquas for doing missions, and finding aging points. So I wasn't quite looking forward to Pass Horse removal, and I didn't really care for the objectives while testing them on pre-prod. I do feel like I've played with the objectives long enough to finally give a review of how I feel about them on the live server. In this review, I'm going to talk about the objectives that I've had so far, as I did write down objectives on 26 different days. There were some days that I did forget to write down how my daily routine has changed in order to work around the objectives, and of course, how am I going about earning passes now, which does relate back to my daily routine. We'll start off with the summary of the objectives that I've had so far, whether I feel doing them is worth the 10 or 20 pass reward, and how they compare to pass horses. On the screen, I made a sort of calendar where I listed all of the objectives that I've had for each day. Obviously, these ones that have question marks are the days that I forgot to write down what objectives I had. The days here that are in blue font are the days that I opened my Horn of Plenty. The font in red, like on February 26th, the 20th, 25th, and the 3rd, are the days I did not do that particular objective. So on the February 3rd, apply a black market item from the reproduction category. I didn't do that objective. And keep in mind that when you do not do an objective, your Horn of Plenty meter does reset, which is why I've only been able to collect the Horn of Plenty twice so far. There are 2 days in March that I did write down. It's March 8th, so I didn't write down the rest of these objectives, but since the 17th, I haven't gotten a Horn of Plenty since, so you're not really missing out on too much. This is just to give you an idea on most of the objectives that I've had so far. In terms of reward versus resources spent, I still feel that pass horses were a better return for me. Nearly every day I've been asked to outright use resources that I didn't need to use with pass horses since I worked them daily. I've had to use 9 aging points, use 12 aging points, use an aging point, spend an aging point on a horse more than 4 years old. Yesterday, one of the days that I did not include, I had to spend an aging point on a horse more than 6 years old. Just lots of aging point objectives. I've had to purchase a horse in the auction, which I tend to avoid because most of the horses I want are in direct sales anyway, and there are very few auctions running on the smaller servers. That's not a problem for me on international, but sometimes on like the AU, CA, the UK server, it'll be 2 hours that you have to wait until an auction is getting down towards the end. And that's not even including if you lose that auction, you now have to go sit around or log back in later on to find another auction. It can be a very time-consuming process. I did have to purchase a Lusitano horse specifically. It didn't have to be in either the auction or direct sales, could be whatever, which I didn't need a Lusitano horse. I did think of buying a Lusitano with the retired coat because that would have worked out great, except there weren't any retired coats that I wanted that day. And I would rather save my money for a coat that I really do want rather than just purchasing a coat just because I have the money for it. That's just how I've always tackled my retired coat collecting habit. I'm not going to change it now. I was asked to remove a unicorn horn once. That was on February 25th. As you can see, it's in red font, which means I did not do that objective that day. You can sell a unicorn for more passes than you get. You only get 20 passes for removing the horn. I'd rather sell it and make some more passes from it. It's just not worth it to me. And then, of course, we get to the 3 times I had to apply a black market reproduction item, the 2 times I had to apply a black market bonus item, and the 1 time I had to use a black market performance item. A few of those you can see, February 3rd, 26th, 20th, I did refuse to do them. There were 2 of them, one on the 16th, one on the 23rd. I did do on accident. I logged in that day, okay, I have to apply a black market item. I'm not going to do it, but later on, completely forget I have it, log back in. Oh, hey, Carnivorous gave me a Hestia's gift today. Let's go ahead and use it and sell the horse. Oops, I just completed that objective, so I went ahead and I collected the passes anyway. Even though I do have these black market items in stock, I had enough items in stock that I could have completed that objective several times over on the days that I have it. I still just don't feel that it's fair to have these objectives on a day's notice. I do have a lot of items right now, but if I did all of these items every single day it asked me to, my objectives will slowly dwindle. And the reason why I have most of these items is number one, I'm quite stingy with how I use them. I like to hoard them, make sure that I have them when I really, really want them. There's nothing worse than it's kind of like opening luck items. Oh shoot, I opened Titans Challenges to get a Falabella today, but hey, guess what? Next week Balios is back in the Titans Challenges. I should have saved my Titans Challenges for Balios. I feel that way about my Aphrodite Steers, Fertility Wands, Zeus's Lightning Bolts, etc. Another thing is that I got most of those items from sending extra pass horses to heaven. I don't have that income anymore. Therefore, over time, my resources are just going to keep dwindling, especially if I use these items on every single day that it asks me to do so. Another issue of resource spending is, as you can see today, I have to sell 80 droppings to the store. I will say, in all fairness, this is very easy to do to get 20 passes. Some players have no use for their droppings. They like to sell them to get the money and the passes from them. I have Plant Horse Divines. I need to save all of my droppings for them. If you guys have Plant Horse Divines, you know what I'm talking about. They eat up a lot of droppings. I don't feed my plant horses their droppings every day like I used to. So I am trying to save them, but I don't like that I have to sell my droppings that I really, really need to get passes from them. I've had to sell droppings before. And this gets me into another issue I experienced during the Great Challenge. The objectives themselves, the daily ones, already feel like a never-ending Great Challenge. And there were some times that I had to do one objective for my dailies on, let's say, Monday, and then I get that same exact objective for the Great Challenge 2 days later. One of those was selling droppings. On February 10th, I had to sell 80 droppings to the store, and I'm a couple days after that, or a couple of days before it, I had to sell 60 droppings for the Great Challenge. The Great Challenge just feels very redundant right now. I just didn't really enjoy the experience of playing the Great Challenge. It's not one of my favorite events anyway, but I don't mind it when it comes around because we didn't used to have objectives all that often. But now we have 2 objectives to do every day, and a never-ending Great Challenge. I just did not enjoy the Great Challenge when we had it, and it just made an extra drain on resources. I've also had to win one rosette 3 times. So here on February 27th, I had to win a rosette, February 7th, and then to either yesterday, I think it was the day before, because yesterday I had to stroke 40 horses for my second objective. So it was the day before yesterday. I had to win a rosette. I have managed to complete this one each time thanks to either my Ocean Divine or an outdated KWPN Cell Francais skiller, but it took at least 2 hours to complete this each time due to either the competitions themselves just taking over 30 minutes to run, or when that competition finally did run, oh, my horse placed 3rd. I now have to go find another competition to enter, wait for that to run. Besides the actual time it takes to complete the objective, I just don't think that 20 pass reward is worth it unless you're somebody that skills often anyway, or if you have a high skill divine like Ocean, like I do. But you run into another problem with those divines. Once in a while, my Ocean will not win a rosette competition. And the problem is there are no rosettes for divine competitions just based on how the prestige for them is set up. You have to open a competition open to all breeds, and divines can only enter one of those a day. If my Ocean does not win that single competition, that's it. I have to go find another horse that I can use for that. Or if you don't skill all that often, or if you don't have a high skilled Ocean Divine, it's just very expensive to skill up a skiller, and that does take time. It's expensive if you want to go buy a ready skiller, you have to spend a bunch of passes on it, or you could spend your own black market items and your own time skilling it up yourself. Skilling is not at all a process I enjoy. It's one of my least favorite aspects on the game. It's why I only skill like 1 or 2 horses a year. I just don't enjoy doing it, so I do really hope this rosette objective goes away. In comparison, time-wise to pass horses, 5 times I've had to stroke horses in amounts of 20, 30, or 40 horses. I think this one is just kind of silly if one of the arguments against pass horses was that not everyone has the time to work lots of horses. I have 33 divines alone that I do have to work daily in order to benefit from their perk. So in terms of the number of horses, I mean, I'm working lots of horses daily. That's not a problem. But stroking is not a required action for your horses, especially immortal ones. So this is one that you only do if you're bluffing or if you just use all of your horse's energy. You don't want it to wake up with negative consequences, so you stroke it to get its energy up. Earlier, I think I mentioned that I had to stroke 40 horses for my objective yesterday, and even after working my farm of 69 divines, 77 leftover pass horses, and about 20 blups, I still had to go back through after working all of those horses to stroke some horses because, yeah, it's just not an action that you need to do with them unless they're very low on energy. Just overall, I feel like most of the objectives are kind of making me jump through hoops to do them because certain tasks, like give an apple to a horse born today, or give X number of apples to X number of horses, or reach a reserve ending with 0, 0, is just not something that you do on a daily basis. And going into these objectives, I just kind of thought they would be very purposeful to what you're already doing on the game. Like, I wouldn't mind having to reach 100 blup with the horse if we had a whole month to do it in. I mean, I can blup a horse within a day, but I know for some players that's not feasible and it does take some time. But, I just want the objectives that if we're going to have these be more realistic and be more purposeful. I think another puzzle about the objectives is that we're not all getting the same objectives, but we are all getting the same rewards for using various amounts of resources. With pass horses, everyone had to do the same task. The goal was the same in the end, but there were different ways you could go about it to make it work for you. If you couldn't spend that time that day to work the horses, or if you only had one day to log in that month, if you could quickly make enough money that you could go in and buy the horses. If you didn't want to spend money on buying them, I didn't want to spend money on buying them, so I just worked my own daily and I was able to gain other resources by doing that at the same time. Unless you're on a phone or something, I can understand not liking pass horses at all because I don't like working horses at all on the mobile version. So in that case, I completely understand. I know that a lot of players have been asked to remove unicorn horns and Pegasus wings multiple times or use 2-star colored tack items that they don't have. However, I've not yet been asked to remove Pegasus wings. I've only been asked to remove a unicorn horn one time. Today's the first time I've had to use 2-star colored tack items. I'm pretty sure it's the first time. I know the last several days I did not have to use 2-star colored tack, and even though there were a couple days here, I forgot what the objective was. I think I would have remembered if I had to use 2-star colored tack. So, like I said, we're all getting completely different objectives, but we're still getting the same rewards for it. And honestly, even with all of my black market item application objectives, I've had a lot and I don't really appreciate that, but I still feel on the whole, I think my objectives I've been a little bit luckier with the ones I've gotten compared to some other players. That's the objectives themselves. We also, of course, have the new Horn of Plenty meter. Because I refused to do objectives several times here, I've only collected from the hot meter twice, which you can see right here. My first Horn of Plenty had a hair pack. That was great. That was fine. I mean, that was totally worth like the 7 days that I had to do. I didn't really put anything into it except for when a rosette competition. I was ready for it, so I didn't spend anything on it. I did make out like a bandit on that one. However, for the second time, February 17th, my Horn of Plenty contained bell boots as the best item. There were no items that equaled passes in that. And the day just before I collected that hop was apply a black market item. I spent a black market item to not get a black market item in return. And granted, that one's kind of dicey, I guess you could argue, because I did not record 2, 4, 6, 7 objectives, before that. Oh, well, I guess I didn't complete those 2 objectives either. Well, I did complete those objectives, I just didn't record them. But still, I feel like that February 16th objective alone added up to everything else that I spent. It wasn't equal to the Horn of Plenty. That Horn of Plenty just isn't a good reward for completing the objectives 7 days in a row. Granted, I knew going into it that the Horn of Plenty would probably not be worth it unless they somehow changed it to to where, okay, you're opening this Horn of Plenty from this meter. It's definitely going to contain, a 80 pass value item or whatever. But it turns out that it doesn't. So it's just not a fun reward to get. Therefore, I'm not motivated to complete these objectives 7 days in a row just to get the Horn of Plenty. I'm more interested in the pass reward. Those are my thoughts on the objectives themselves. How has my daily routine changed? When we had pass horses, in the course of about 30 minutes, often less, I could complete my dailies, which included Equestrian Center Workshop Meadow Management, my 33 daily divines. I just worked 33 out of the however many I have. I have more than that, but I only worked 33 of them because those were the ones that you have to work daily in order to benefit from their perk. I entered my 8 horses into the Grand Prix. They're just outdated horses. I enter the same ones every day simply for that 1000 participants prize. I have my pass horse farm of around 200 to 300 horses and about half a dozen blups that I aged up daily. If I felt like playing some more, I'd choose one of my several breeding projects to focus on. I have my all breed project right here. I don't work all of these at the same time when I choose to work on them. If I did want to work on my all breed project that day, I have like 8 at a time that I would work on. I have my Knabstrupper Unicorn project. This has been ongoing for the last 2 years. I started this just to put limited and pre-CS coats on them. The breeders, the broodmares, and the stud, I would work these daily because I just do a lesson with them, cover them when they're ready, fold them when they're ready. And then if I felt like blupping these that day, I'd blup a couple of these. And then I have my ongoing drum horse, my drum draft horse line. And this one I also just started to put limited draft coats on. But because there aren't many limited draft coats that come out, I don't have to work these all that often. And what I would do, I would just rotate these different projects. Let's say maybe today I felt like blupping up my Knabstrupper unicorns. Okay, fine. Then tomorrow I'll work on my all breed project. I just rotated it in a way, whatever floats my boat. It just kept me from getting bored with my projects, and I enjoy doing that. I didn't want to work them every day. Before we get into my new routine, I want to say that I think part of my expectation with the objectives and how they were presented was that they give players more time to focus on blups rather than clicking through pass horses, which I didn't really mind anyway because pass horses took me about just 10 minutes. And on both Leiden and Flight Rising, there are dailies that I and other players do that we don't particularly enjoy. If any of you play Flight Rising, you know about Glimmer and Gloom. You can get it done in 15 minutes. It gets boring after a little bit, but you make 75,000 treasure. It's just there are certain dailies you can do on games that might be a bit tedious for the 10 minutes you have to do them, but they get you really rich, and that's how I felt pass horses were. So I sent my last pass horses to heaven on January 20th, and from that day to about a week after the objectives were introduced on January 29th, we're getting into February here, I didn't work my pass horses because I thought, well, you're not going to get passes from them anymore, and I knew going into it that Yggdrasil would not be worth it for me. I thought I was done working my pass horses. However, I quickly found that my dropping amount was dropping because my plant horse divines were eating more than I was getting from the 30 or so daily divines and the handful of blups that I was working on. And this was even after I stopped feeding all of them the 200 maximum every day. I'm not sure how much my iron intake dropped, but because the majority of the horses that were boarded in my equestrian center were my pass horses, and those were mainly the only horses I did lessons with, I'm going to hazard a guess that my iron resources dropped too, but probably not nearly as much as my droppings. So on week 2, after I noticed a drop in my resources, I started working more horses again. I boarded all of my dust collecting divines, which are these here. There's 36 horses in here. I never used to touch these horses because they either did not offer me any perk or I did not have to work with them daily in order to benefit from their perk. That includes divines like Venus or Gemini. I didn't have to work them to get their gift from them, so they just sat there. However, I boarded all of them in my equestrian center, and I now do lessons with them every day. Unfortunately, though, several of these older divines that I have, like Venus and Earth, Sagittarius, I put Plutus's parchments on them when I originally got them years ago. They don't earn me droppings. Their droppings get converted into money. I now work my previously rotated Knabstrupper unicorns, my drums been worked today, my all breed project, click on that. I now work these every day. And then sometimes I do go through into my miscellaneous blips and I work a couple of these. I work all of these horses every day now to get droppings from them. I did add a secondary unicorn farm. These are all Arabian unicorns here. I added these to the list, and not just for droppings. I'll get into the secondary reason for that in a little bit. Even worse of it, I started working my leftover pass horses again. I'm breeding them still. There's 77 horses in here. I thought I was done working with them, but I'm not. It's not just to keep gaining resources from them, but it's also to another way to make passes. So that segues into how I'm earning passes now. I do understand decreasing the amount of the monthly passes that we can get, because I did think that the 3,100 free passes, along with the extra black market and bonus items that we got from sending extra pass horses to heaven, was very generous. From a business standpoint, I very much understand decreasing the amount of monthly passes that we can get. But that 900 or so free passes we can get now, it's not guaranteed like it was before. And then we still have the sales fee on top of it. And I would have been okay. I was kind of okay with sales fee in the beginning, because I know I did talk about the sales fee in some previous videos, and I mentioned I was okay with it because it was going to combat inflation, since divines were now offering passes where they hadn't before, combined with pass horses. But then pass horses are no longer around. I don't know that we need that sales fee purely for combating inflation anymore. Anyway, back to earning passes. The secondary unicorn farm that I set up is so I can sell their foals. I didn't have to buy these specifically for this reason at all. These are part of my RC collection that I've had for ages. I just filtered out horses that I knew I had the same breed of. Luckily, I had several Arabians. I have this one stallion for all of these mares. They're all immortal. Good thing about retired colt collecting, most RCs come with immortal, or come with philosopher stones. The horses are immortal when you buy them. So they'll live forever, and I just make sure that I work them every day. I foal them when they're ready to foal, and then I cover them when they're ready to be covered. Also, not only do I sell the foals, but this doubles as a backup for that breed a unicorn objective or give birth to a unicorn foal, just in case my Nabstopper farm here doesn't give birth to a unicorn foal. I have this other unicorn farm to fall back on in case I need it for that objective. So unicorns do seem to sell well for passes. They don't sell for a whole lot, just because the ones that I have, they're very outdated in their GP. But I do think yesterday I sold a uni foal for 30 passes maybe, and then you have to take a few off because of the sales fee. For the leftover pass horses, I'm working these up, letting them age daily. And the good thing is that I already had a bunch of draft horses here, and they still had covers left. Draft horses and donkeys are both needed for the objectives. So for some of these, I'm just selling the foals outright. As soon as the foal is born, I sell it because it has 3 covers left, makes it more desirable. For some of the adults, I'll use all of the covers up myself, and then I'll just keep aging them up, sell them when they get older. Or I might use 1 or 2 covers for myself, and then I'll sell it when it still has a cover or 2 left, because the more covers it has, the more valuable it is. Yesterday, I managed to sell a female draft that had all 3 covers left for 50 passes. That's 45 passes once you take out the sales fee. And it was just a crossbred, because all of these horses are crossbred. So somebody probably just needed it for an objective to cover it or whatever. I did notice that donkeys are listed for higher. Yesterday when I looked, the cheapest donkey was listed for 60 passes, but I haven't been breeding and selling donkeys to know how easily they sell. Just because the cheapest one is listed for 60 passes doesn't mean players are buying it for that. It could have been sitting there for days for all I know. I don't know. Sometimes you don't know how easily a certain type of horse is selling until you get out and you start trying to sell it yourself. I'm doing the same thing for Pegasus, as players have to remove Pegasus wings. I don't have any Pegasus that I'm willing to sell. I don't currently want to put my own Medusa's bloods on horses to sell them. So what I've done, I've gone into the sales and I bought a few Pegasi for about 50,000 that I could then resell for 30 passes, 27 passes after the fee. However, I haven't sat down to do the pass to equus ratio to find out if I'm technically making a profit on that. I could actually be losing money by buying it for 50,000, reselling it for 30 passes, but I value passes more than equus, so if I'm losing out, I'm losing out. It doesn't really matter right now. So my leftover pass horses, Yggdrasil's rewards, they're just not worth the hundreds of old horses that you have to send to heaven. So instead of using my leftover pass horses to get him and age him up, I'm selling my leftover pass horses. I'm probably just going to keep calling these guys pass horses because I don't know what else to call them. Just leftovers, food, tree food, fertilizer. I don't know what to call them really. But anyway, I just sell them when they reach 20 years old. I managed to do this very well for like a couple of weeks. I was selling horses I sold like a couple horses a week for about 12 passes each, but over the last few days the market has become very, very saturated. There are about 2 pages worth in the very beginning of horses selling for 10 passes that are over the age of 20. So like this horse here, Fail, this one I originally listed it for 12 passes over a week ago. It didn't sell. I canceled it, put it back up for 10 passes. It's still sitting for sale. The market's just become very, very saturated. Prices have dropped a lot. Now, the market saturation for older horses gets me into how sustainable are the prices for these other species I've sold, the draft horses, unicorns, etc. This was talked about a little bit in the VIP forum, but some thoughts are that once players are more settled, more prepared for the objectives, they won't need to outsource some of these other horses anymore. For Pegasus and unicorns, you probably will have to outsource if you do want to do those objectives, such as removing a horn, removing Pegasus wings, but you don't want to remove your own horse's body parts, so you're going to go out and buy some. But for drafts and donkeys, you only need to start off with a male and female of each with covers left, because due to their 3 cover limit, most stallion owners are not going to offer public covers. You'll have to buy a male for yourself. But once you have that male and female breeding pair, you're done. You have your self-sustaining draft or donkey farm, can keep breeding for yourself, and you don't have to buy anymore. However, there is kind of the counter argument that because some players are earning passes when they may not have earned any before, they may be more willing to keep spending passes on these horses. I just think this is something, it's too early to tell what the market is going to do for that. Another issue is I don't know that the market ever settled down after the economy update that we had in November. Prices were still kind of crazy. They were getting a little bit more predictable, and then pass horses were removed, and then we have all this other craziness going on. So it's still kind of early to tell. If you are running low on passes, selling horses is an option if you're paying attention to what types of horses are required for the objectives. Over the past 4 days, I have made 237 passes from horse sales, and that is after you take out the sales fee. So if we didn't have the sales fee, I would have made more than that. However, I'm still having to work all of these horses, the older horses specifically, and I'm getting a fraction of what I used to. I think the best example is I'm still aging up these horses, letting them get older over time, but a 30-year-old horse used to make me 100 passes. Now I'm selling a 20-year-old horse just for 10 passes. I'm making way less than what I used to. I could age these up more, and I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep them around a bit longer because, even if you sell it when it's 20 years old, a player, whoever buys it, if they do want it for Yggdrasil, they still have to age it up 5 more years for it to count. So I think if I age it up more, then, it'll sell for more, just kind of like pass horses. A 27-year-old horse would still sell for less than a 30-year-old horse would, because you'd have to age it up before you could send it to heaven. In terms of funding my VIP account, I'm doing okay so long as I do the majority of my daily objectives. I sell some of these horses. Also, I do have about 20 divines that offer me passes, so I'm doing okay on that. I can't spend passes as often as I used to. Now, I am curious on how the higher valued stock is selling. Higher value like retired coats, top genetic potential, what have you. I'm selling a lot of low quality stock for cheaper prices, not just because they're cheap, but I think the ability to get 10, 20, or 30 passes per day means players can quickly go and spend those passes. However, if you want to buy something more expensive, you have to save up for a lot longer than what you used to. So, from the experience of a buyer, specifically a retired coat collector, I can say that I have not bought a retired coat or any horse for that matter for passes since this update occurred. I just don't have enough like I used to. All of the retired coats I've been looking at lately, I've been looking to spend Equus instead of my passes. I don't have enough to keep spending on retired coats and VIP and events. I was already very careful with my spending before. Don't get me wrong, but now I have to be even more frugal. I have to prioritize my VIP much more than I used to. So if anybody has any feedback, from the standpoint of somebody who sells retired coats or, very high GP regular stock or unicorns or whatever, please let me know. I'm curious about that. So I think that pretty much covers all of my thoughts regarding the objectives. For the most part, my opinions have not changed. I still very much prefer pass horses. I would even completely take pass horses back even if we could only get 1,000 a month. That was it. Like I said, from a business standpoint, I completely understand losing like the 2,000 passes per month. It's frustrating. I get it, but from a business standpoint, I do understand. However, my main issues with the objectives is just the rewards just aren't worth what we're putting into it, especially compared to how my experience was with the pass horse system. And I know not everybody had the same experience with that. For some players, they just didn't like it, just like I don't really like the objective system. But I think just for the fact that everybody is getting different objectives, but we're all getting the same reward, just really kind of puts a wrench in it. I would not mind dealing with these more if we had more than just the one day to do these two. So we could have something like the Great Challenge where we could complete like the previous 3-day objectives at least. Preferably, I would like to have like a week or the whole month. That way, if you were on vacation, something mega happened, you lost internet access or whatever, and you couldn't access the game for a few weeks, didn't matter, if you were really thrifty about your items or how you did the objectives, tackled them, you could complete them all in just a couple of days' time. And if we did have longer to complete some of these objectives, I wouldn't mind keeping some of these around, like applying a black market item. I personally would never be on board with removing a unicorn horn, Pegasus wings. It's just something to me that I've never liked to do. There have been a few times I've done them in events for objectives, but it's just not really something I like to do. The Winna Rosette one is it's kind of dicey because I would like to say, well, a month is plenty of time to do that. For some other players, it's just not very feasible. And of course, I would like to see something different with that Horn of Plenty because right now it's just not really a reward. I suppose it's probably okay if you can, if you just wait and you open it when there's a divine on offer, which is what I did for my first Horn of Plenty because I opened that one on February 3rd. Oh no, February 10th says right here. Duh. And that was the same weekend that we had the Love Divine. So I thought, oh cool, that's great. I'll open it, which I did that off camera because otherwise I got my Love Divines. I did a video on that, but I ended up getting a Horn of Plenty later on and I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and open that now because there's a divine on offer, but I didn't get the divine. I got the Hera pack. That was fine. I don't remember if this weekend there had to have been a Horn of Plenty offer going on, otherwise I wouldn't have opened it. But for the life of me, I can't remember what was in there. I'd have to look. But either way, it didn't do me any good. So even if you want to save that Horn of Plenty, you could hang on to that Horn of Plenty 2 weeks for a Horn of Plenty offer, and then you don't win the divine and you get bell boots in it, and it's still just not worth it. I mean, I would love to get a golden apple out of it, but I guess that doesn't do much good for players who don't like golden apples, in which case the Horn of Plenty is a better option because it's random. But I suppose make it so that we get at least an item valued at like 60 passes or something. So I am curious about what feedback you all have now that the objectives have been ongoing for the last month. Some players I've seen in the forums, their opinion has changed. They're more in favor of the objectives and they quite like them. That's fine. I still don't really like them, and I really hope that we see some changes to them in the future. So thank you all for joining me today, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.